我觉得有一点我不得不承认，我们两个的语言其实是完全没有100%完全互通的。我们有时候确实存在误解，你需要重复的跟我说，我需要再问你2遍才能够听懂你在说什么。我们的语言能力确实是有限的。不知道你们有没有过这样的经历？本来以为2个人很合拍，但是出去旅游一圈发现不合拍，然后分道扬镳了。所以有一个著名的词叫和田分手。但是我们2个在一起旅行了差不多2、3年了，我们基本上是全职旅行。大部分时间都在一起，但是我们还没有分开。虽然我们有很大的文化差异。
So what's the secret?
所以这个视频我们想要聊一聊文化差异为我们带来了什么，我们是怎么克服它的，我们现在还有没有文化差异？
有，你是中国人，我是英国人。
你喜欢吃 pasta， 我喜欢吃麻辣烫。
Can you think of any big culture differences we had in the past?
现在的我觉得没有那么多了，而且就算是我们有差异，我觉得是更在于是我们2个个体之间的差异。我们平时的习惯，比如说你用电脑多，用手机少，我用手机比较多。但是我们的背景、我们的文化差异这方面，我觉得我们都可以很快的去适应，就是它不再会变成一个阻挡我们、带给我们困扰的一个东西了。它只是一个存在而已，然后就像是我们去吃西餐还是吃中餐一样，就是不会因为吃的不一样、习惯不一样而引起争吵。
I think when people consider these kind of relationships between people of different countries, they think there must be so many problems. Maybe for some people there are, but for me, I feel like the big problems it's caused us are so few. When we first met, I couldn't really eat a lot of Chinese food. I just had 番茄炒蛋. But over time, I learned from you like what foods I might like, and you helped to introduce so many different Chinese foods to me, and now I love Chinese food. There's so much Chinese food that I like more than English food.
对，我刚出国的第一次出国嘛，去英国，然后我那个时候我的就是对吃这个事情的思维还没有转变过来，我会当时的想法就是坚持，我从小吃到大的东西是最好吃的，我一定要吃那个，就是有点给自己制造那个就是那个很难的境地，就是感觉吃不到我就会很难一样。像在内蒙这边有很多吃的，像奶茶是咸的，但是喝着喝着就习惯了，发现反而还爱上它了。如果我一开始就认为奶茶不应该是咸的，就应该是甜的，那我可能永远也不会接受的。
Right, it's really about acceptance and being able to change yourself. Instead of saying like, this isn't the way that I'm used to doing it, we need to do it the way I'm used to doing it. It's about saying, oh, there's another way that you can do this as well, and actually that's okay. It's okay to do it like that. Through this process, we've expanded the range of tastes that we enjoy.
虽然如此，但是有时候我确实发现，如果时间久你不吃你家乡的东西，你好像还是会有点想念的那个感觉。从这个角度还是能看到，就是我们的背景带给我们的影响有多么的深刻。
We've let each other's cultures into our lives. And we've accepted completely the culture in each other. I don't try and change your culture. You don't try and change my culture. We just try and understand it and understand how it influences us.
我觉得有一点我不得不承认，我们2个的语言其实是完全没有100%完全互通的。我们有时候确实存在误解，你需要重复的跟我说，我需要再问你2遍才能够听懂你在说什么。我们的语言能力确实是有限的。但是我们真的很理解对方。至少就是别人也认为我们2个就好像比就是同一个国家的人交流更顺畅。就是可能在更深层次的概念上，不只是局限在语言上。我觉得这个就是因为我们2个的语言不一样，反而让我们去就是花更多的精力，还有让自己更加耐下性子来去理解对方。
It made us so patient when we were trying to understand each other. When we were first together, it was really easy for us to misunderstand each other because of Wenhua. If it was a British person who I was in a relationship with, it would seem like they were doing this thing for a certain reason. And so it's very easy to assume the wrong thing. So every time something like that happened, we had to like dig into it and find out what the real reason was, the reason behind why you acted in a certain way. And that established like a pattern for us where like we always did that. We still do that. And I think that creates so much room for understanding when you're always trying to find out why the other person is acting and not just assuming you know. Because when you assume you know, you fall into dangerous territory, I think. That's when you fall into the territory of really misunderstanding the other person.
我还记得当时，我们刚在一起的时候嘛，就是我们两个的语言比现在肯定要差很多，就是不通的那个比例是很大的。然后我记得你跟我说过，就是我对你提出了担心，我在想我们两个会不会沟通不顺畅啊？我记得你当时跟我说一句话，你说正是这样才会很有意思呀。That's what makes it fun。然后那句话让我也感觉到，就是对我应该就是对待，不管是文化差异也好，就是差异也好，应该把它当做是一个有意思的事情，你可以从中收获到东西，而不是一听这个词就被劝退了。
I think a lot of the time when we think of differences, we think of trying to separate ourselves from them, or even we get scared of those differences, scared of the unknown. Maybe that's where things like racism come from, right? It's just an unwillingness to let that thing closer into your life and understand it better. And instead of understanding it better, you develop all these like thoughts about it that are totally unfounded because you've never actually had real contact with that type of person or thing or whatever.
我觉得很好的例子，就比如说提到不同的国家，比如说大家有一些人可能会对一些落后国家有歧视，比如说，特别是有色人种，比如说提到印度或者非洲的时候呢，很多人马上的感觉就是他们跟我们不一样，他们皮肤跟我们不一样，他们的饮食文化，他们用手吃饭这么之类的，就马上，就是有点去低看了别人，去抬高了自己。然后如果是能够接受差异这件事情本身的话，像我的话，我觉得我是很想去那里看看他们怎么生活的，我很愿意去看看他们到底跟我们哪里不一样。
I remember some of the poorer places we've been to and seeing people really, really happy, like living a simple life. And I feel I've gotten so much out of that. Just the understanding that sometimes maybe when we make our life more complicated, we don't make it more happy. Maybe we make it more efficient, but that just means we have to do more work with the time that we save ourselves. You know, like our life isn't better than someone else's because we have more money than them, we have more technology than them, or whatever necessarily. It really isn't. I think that's a big misunderstanding, and it's a big assumption that people have because they haven't experienced the other side of the coin. It's just different. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Obviously, I'm not saying it's great to be poor, but you become stronger in certain ways. You become more resilient. I feel like the culture differences we're talking about are actually just differences, right? Everyone has differences. In a relationship, you always have differences.
如果两个人一模一样的话，其实我觉得应该挺无聊的吧。就是可能会没有任何的新鲜感，或者是没有任何的 surprise， 因为你们都一模一样了。就好像没有那个创新的空间了。
You also have nothing to learn from each other if you're totally the same, right? I've learned so much from you and your culture. I think it's made me a better person. I think it's made me a more accepting person. I don't want to change you. I think when you find differences, it's a good thing. It's not something you should run away from. It's not something you should be scared of. It's something you should embrace.
希望有文化差异的人们可以看到这个视频之后，可以明白差异是好事儿，不是坏事儿。